The boy who gave away his brother. Ma'am, do you want a baby? The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. The woman froze mid-step, her shopping bag slipping slightly from her grip. She turned around slowly, her heart suddenly pounding against her ribs. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Standing before her was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 11 years old. His clothes were dirty and torn, hanging loosely on his thin frame. His hair was matted and tangled, like he hadn't bathed in weeks. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped her cold. It was what he was holding. Cradled in his trembling arms was a baby. A tiny, fragile newborn, maybe 5 or 6 months old. The infant's clothes were filthy, his face pale and gaunt. His breathing was so shallow, so faint that it seemed like he didn't have the strength to even cry. The boy looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much, eyes that belonged to someone much older. And then he said it again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, my little brother, he's so hungry. Will you take him?" Rebecca had never imagined that an ordinary Tuesday afternoon would turn her entire world upside down. She had simply been walking through the downtown market, like she did every week. The familiar chaos surrounded her. Vendors shouting prices, the sweet smell of fresh strawberries mixing with the aroma of hot pretzels from a corner stand, street musicians playing for spare change, and fortune tellers promising to change your life for just $10. Rebecca wasn't paying attention to any of it. Her mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts about her own struggles, her own loneliness. She walked quickly, wanting nothing more than to get home, pick up what she needed, and retreat back into her quiet apartment. That's when she felt it. A small tug on her jacket sleeve. She stopped immediately, startled. Someone had grabbed her. She spun around, ready to pull away from whatever beggar or street vendor was trying to get her attention. But the words died in her throat when she saw him. The boy stood there, barely reaching her shoulder, holding the baby like it was the most precious and yet the most burdensome thing in the world. His eyes were sunken, shadowed with exhaustion and something else, something that looked like the weight of impossible choices. "What did you say?" Rebecca's voice came out shakier than she intended. The boy swallowed hard. He shifted the baby's weight in his arms, and for a moment she thought he might not repeat it. Then, quietly, desperately, he spoke again. "If you want him, you can have him. Please." Rebecca's mind went blank. She couldn't process what she was hearing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. Children didn't just offer their siblings to strangers on the street. Not in America, not in Chicago, not in 2025. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was barely audible now. "Where's your mother?" The boy's face twisted, a mixture of shame and fear crossing his features. He glanced over his shoulder, and Rebecca followed his gaze. That's when she saw her. Slumped against a brick wall about 30 feet away was a woman. Her clothes were stained and torn, her hair hanging in greasy strands around her face. In her hand was a bottle wrapped in a brown paper bag. Her eyes were open, but they were vacant, staring at nothing. She looked like a ghost, like someone who had already left this world, even though her body was still here. "My mom," the boy said quietly. "She said if I don't find someone to take him, she's going to throw him in the river." The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Her entire body went cold. She looked down at the baby, this tiny, helpless infant who had done nothing wrong, who had simply been born into impossible circumstances. His little chest rose and fell with each shallow breath. His lips were chapped and dry. "What's your name?" Rebecca heard herself asking, though her voice sounded far away. "Ethan," the boy replied. "And this is Noah." Rebecca took a deep breath. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was crazy, that she should call the police, that she should walk away and let the authorities handle it. But when she looked into Ethan's eyes, she saw something that broke through all of that logic. She saw a child trying desperately to save his brother's life. She saw courage wrapped in desperation. She saw love in its purest, most painful form. Without thinking, Rebecca reached out her arms. "Come here," she whispered. Ethan hesitated for just a moment. Then, carefully, so carefully, he placed Noah into her arms. The baby was lighter than she expected, frighteningly so. She could feel his tiny ribs through his dirty onesie. When was the last time he had been fed? When was the last time someone had held him with tenderness? "Come with me," Rebecca said, looking at Ethan. "Both of you." Ethan's eyes widened. "You want me too?" "I'm not separating you," Rebecca said firmly. "You're brothers. You stay together." For the first time since she'd met him, Ethan's face showed something other than fear or exhaustion. It showed hope. Fragile, uncertain hope, but hope nonetheless. The market continued around them, oblivious to the life-changing moment happening in its midst. Vendors kept shouting, people kept walking, the world kept turning, but for Rebecca, everything had changed. She adjusted Noah in her arms and reached out her free hand to Ethan. "Let's go home." Ethan didn't ask questions as they walked to Rebecca's car. He didn't speak at all, actually. He just followed silently, his small hand gripped tightly in hers, his eyes constantly darting around as if he expected someone to stop them, to take them back. When they arrived at Rebecca's modest two-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, Ethan stood in the doorway, taking it all in. It wasn't much. A lived-in couch, a small kitchen with mismatched dishes, family photos on the walls. But to him, it must have looked like a palace. "You can come in," Rebecca said gently. "It's okay." Ethan stepped inside, his movements careful and measured. He stood in the center of the living room, arms at his sides, waiting for orders, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for this dream to end. The first thing Rebecca did was feed Noah. She had some emergency formula in her pantry, a remnant from when she used to babysit her sister's kids. As soon as the bottle touched Noah's lips, he latched on with desperate hunger, his tiny hands gripping the bottle as if it might disappear. Ethan watched silently from the corner, his body tense, his eyes never leaving his brother. When Noah finally fell asleep, his belly full for the first time in who knows how long, Rebecca turned to Ethan. "Are you hungry?" Ethan nodded slowly. She made him a sandwich, simple turkey and cheese, and watched as he ate it like it was a five-star meal. He didn't rush. He didn't grab. He just ate slowly, methodically, savoring every bite. "When's the last time you ate?" Rebecca asked quietly. Ethan shrugged. "Yesterday." "Maybe." Rebecca's heart clenched. "And Noah?" "I found some formula in a dumpster behind the grocery store 2 days ago. It was expired, but—" Ethan trailed off, his voice thick with shame. Rebecca had to turn away for a moment, fighting back tears. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "You're safe now," she said, turning back to face him. "Both of you. You don't have to worry anymore." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. Because there was still the matter of their mother. The woman who had been willing to throw her own child into a river. The woman who had sent her 11-year-old son to give his brother away to strangers. That night, Rebecca set up the spare bedroom for the boys. She put Noah in a makeshift crib, really just a drawer lined with soft blankets, and made up the bed for Ethan. But when she checked on them an hour later, Ethan wasn't in the bed. He was sitting on the floor next to the drawer, his back against the wall, his eyes wide open. "You can't sleep?" Rebecca asked softly from the doorway. "No," Ethan said simply. "There's nothing to be afraid of here. You're safe." Ethan didn't respond right away. He just stared at the door, his body rigid with tension. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "What if I fall asleep and she comes?" The question sent a chill down Rebecca's spine. "Who?" Ethan looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw pure, primal fear. "My mom." Before Rebecca could respond, a sound shattered the silence. Heavy pounding on the apartment door. Aggressive, angry, demanding. Ethan jumped to his feet, his face draining of all color. "She's here," he breathed. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. She held up a hand to Ethan. "Stay here with Noah. Don't open this door." She walked to the front door, her legs feeling like they might give out beneath her. The pounding continued, louder now, more insistent. She took a deep breath and opened it. The woman from the street stood there, swaying slightly. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face twisted with rage, and something else. The desperate, wild look of an addict needing a fix. "You think you can just take my kids?" The woman's voice was harsh, slurred. "You think you can steal them from me?" "You left them in the street," Rebecca said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You told your 11-year-old son to give his baby brother away. You weren't taking care of them." The woman, her name was Michelle, Rebecca would later learn, laughed bitterly. "They're mine. I gave birth to them. You can't just take what's mine." I'm not taking anything. I'm protecting them. Michelle's face hardened. I want money. Give me money, and I'll leave them alone. Every fiber of Rebecca's being rebelled against this. But as she stood there, looking at this broken, desperate woman, she realized she had no choice. Not right now, not with the boys in danger. She went to her bedroom, grabbed $300 from her emergency fund, and came back. Take it, and leave us alone. Michelle snatched the bills, counted them quickly, and stuffed them in her pocket. This isn't over, she said with a cold smile. Then she turned and disappeared down the hallway. Rebecca shut the door and locked it, her hands shaking. When she turned around, Ethan was standing in the hallway, his face a mask of hurt and confusion. You bought us, he said, his voice flat, just like she said you would. The words felt like a knife to Rebecca's heart. No, Ethan, I didn't buy you. I'm protecting you. There's a difference. But Ethan just stared at her, his eyes filled with a pain too deep for his age. Then he turned and walked back to the bedroom, shutting the door behind him. Rebecca stood alone in the hallway, wondering if she'd just made everything worse. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Rebecca's life. She called Child Protective Services, filed reports, met with social workers. But the system moved slowly, grinding through paperwork and bureaucracy while she tried to give the boys some semblance of stability. Noah began to thrive. With regular meals and proper care, color returned to his cheeks. He started to smile, to make those sweet baby sounds that melted Rebecca's heart. But Ethan remained distant, guarded. He was polite, obedient, but there was a wall around him that Rebecca couldn't break through. Until the night Michelle came back, Rebecca woke to the sound of her apartment door opening. She'd been so careful about locking it, but somehow, had she forgotten? Had Michelle picked the lock? The door was open. She rushed to the boys' room. The door was ajar. The bed was empty. The drawer where Noah slept was empty too. No, 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 no! Panic seized her. She ran through the apartment, checking every room. They were gone. Both of them gone. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her fingers trembling so badly she could barely hit the numbers. But when she explained the situation to the operator, the response was devastating. Ma'am, if she's their biological mother, we can't do anything right now. You'll need to file for emergency custody through the courts. But she's an addict. She threatened to kill them. I understand, but without legal custody, our hands are tied. I'm sorry. Rebecca wanted to scream. Instead, she hung up and ran downstairs. The building's night doorman, old Mr. Peterson, was at his post. Did you see them? Rebecca gasped. Did you see someone leave with 2 boys? Mr. Peterson nodded, his face troubled. Yeah, about 20 minutes ago. That woman, the one who came before. She was forcing them out. I tried to stop her, but she started screaming that they were her kids, and I had no right. I'm sorry, I should have... Rebecca didn't wait to hear the rest. She ran out into the street, looking frantically in every direction. But the night was dark and empty. They could be anywhere. She spent the rest of the night searching. She went to the market where she'd first met Ethan. She checked homeless shelters, asked street vendors, showed Ethan's picture to anyone who would look. Most people just shook their heads or looked away, uncomfortable with getting involved. Finally, as dawn broke, a homeless man near the L station recognized the description. I seen her, he said. Seen her with some kids. And that guy, Big Ray. They went toward his place over on Ashland. Big Ray. The name meant nothing to Rebecca. But the way the homeless man said it, with fear and respect, told her everything she needed to know. She found the address through a combination of desperate Googling and asking more questions on the street. It was an abandoned building in a rough neighborhood, the kind of place where police sirens were background music and people didn't ask questions. Rebecca knew she should wait for the police. She knew this was dangerous. But the image of Ethan and Noah in that place, with that woman and whoever this Big Ray was, pushed her forward. The building smelled of mold and decay. Broken glass crunched under her feet. Graffiti covered the walls. She heard voices from the second floor, rough voices, laughing about something. She climbed the stairs slowly, her heart pounding. At the top, she saw a doorway with light spilling out. She crept closer and peered inside. Michelle was there, sprawled on a filthy couch, already high on something. Next to her was a man covered in tattoos, Big Ray, presumably. And in the corner, sitting on the floor with Noah in his arms, was Ethan. His face was bruised, fresh bruises. Something inside Rebecca snapped. Every fear, every caution evaporated. She pulled out her phone and hit record, then stepped into the room. "I'm calling the police," she said, her voice steady despite her terror. "Right now." Big Ray stood up, menacing. "Lady, you need to leave. Not without them." Michelle laughed, that same bitter, hollow sound. "They're mine. You can't have them. You sold them to me, remember? In front of witnesses. And now I have you on video in a crack house with your kids. The kids you've been neglecting and abusing." It was a bluff, mostly. But Michelle's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Big Ray looked at Michelle. "This your problem," he said. "Handle it, or get out of my place." Michelle stood up, swaying. For a moment, Rebecca thought she might charge, but then something in her seemed to break. She looked at Ethan, at Noah, and for just a second, Rebecca saw something human in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. "Take them," Michelle said quietly. "Just take them." Rebecca didn't hesitate. She crossed the room, helped Ethan to his feet, and took Noah from his arms. "Come on, we're going home." They were halfway down the stairs when she heard Michelle call out, "I'll get them back, you'll see." But her voice was weak, defeated. Rebecca knew the fight wasn't over, but for now, she had them. They were safe. The court battle that followed was brutal. Michelle didn't show up for most of the hearings, but when she did, she was either high or belligerent. Her lawyer tried to argue that she'd been coerced, that she was getting clean, that she deserved another chance. But Rebecca had documentation, photos of the boys' condition when she found them, medical records showing malnutrition, testimonies from social workers, and most importantly, she had Ethan. On the final day of the custody hearing, the judge called Ethan to testify. Rebecca held his hand as they walked to the front of the courtroom. Ethan looked so small in that big space, surrounded by adults in suits talking about his future. Michelle's lawyer stood up, confident and smug. "Ethan," he said in a friendly tone, "do you love your mother?" The courtroom fell silent. Every eye was on the 11-year-old boy standing there, in his too big borrowed suit. Rebecca saw his hands trembling. She wanted to reach out, to protect him. But this was something he had to do himself. Ethan looked at his mother. Michelle stared back, her face hard, challenging him to choose her. Then Ethan looked at the lawyer. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "I love the mother I always wanted, not the mother I had." You could have heard a pin drop. Michelle's face crumbled. The lawyer sat down, deflated. Even the judge seemed moved, pausing before looking down at his papers. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. In that moment, she realized that Ethan had been protecting her all along. He'd been distant not because he didn't trust her, but because he'd been afraid to hope. Afraid to believe that someone could actually choose him, could actually stay. The judge cleared his throat. "This court finds that it is in the best interest of both Ethan and Noah to be placed in the permanent custody of Rebecca Thompson. Furthermore, the biological mother's parental rights are hereby terminated due to neglect, abandonment, and failure to provide proper care." For a moment, Ethan just stood there, frozen. Then he turned to Rebecca, his eyes wide. "Does this mean we get to stay?" Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, baby, it means you get to stay forever." Ethan's face transformed. The wall he'd built around himself cracked, then crumbled entirely. He threw his arms around Rebecca and held on like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "Let's go home," he whispered against her shoulder. And then, for the first time, he said the word he'd been too afraid to say. "Mom." Rebecca closed her eyes and held both her boys close, feeling the weight and the gift of what had just been given to her. Not just children, a family. As they walked out of that courtroom into the bright afternoon sunlight, Rebecca thought about that day in the market. That moment when a desperate boy had asked her if she wanted a baby. She'd said yes without really understanding what she was saying yes to. She was saying yes to sleepless nights and worried moments. Yes to healing trauma and building trust. Yes to love that would challenge her and change her and make her someone she never knew she could be. She was saying yes to being exactly what Ethan had always been for Noah, someone who would never give up, no matter how hard it got. That night, after putting Noah to bed and making sure Ethan was comfortable in what was now officially his room, Rebecca sat in her living room alone. She thought about the woman in the market who'd been so focused on her own problems. That woman seemed like a stranger now. She'd gone to the market looking for strawberries. Instead, she'd found her purpose. She'd found her family. And she'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you can say to someone who's drowning is simply this: I see you. I've got you. You're not alone anymore. Moral of the story: the family we choose can be just as powerful as the family we're born into. Sometimes love isn't about biology. It's about showing up, staying present, and refusing to walk away when things get hard. One moment of courage can change not just your life, but the lives of those who need you most. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us of the power of compassion, courage, and unconditional love. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that they have the power to change a life, maybe even their own.